we have been through 3 of the 4 methods for solving a quadratic equation. Square roots, factoring, completing the square. The last of the 4 types is the quadratic formula. So, quadratic formula, this is probably not a formula that is new for anybody, that is not new for anybody. That's negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So that is your quadratic formula. Basically the standard form of a quadratic function, solve for x. So it's something that's pretty well used a lot. So before we get into using the whole formula, we're going to use a specific piece of it, and that is the part underneath the square root, b squared minus 4ac, which is called the discriminant. So the discriminant will tell you what kind of answers you should expect to get. What kind of solutions should you expect to get? So b squared minus 4ac, you identify a, b, and c, plug them into the formula. Once you do that, you'll get a number. What that number is will dictate what kind of solutions you have. So, if the number you get is greater than 0, that means you're going to have 2 real solutions. Now, real can fall into 2 different categories: rational, irrational. Rational, it's going to take the form of a fraction, or it can be written as a fraction. Irrational, it's going to be some kind of square root that can't be simplified / a decimal. So, if you solve out b squared minus 4ac and you get a perfect square, then the solutions are rational. If it's not a perfect square, then they're irrational. So, if you get a positive discriminant, then there's 2 different categories it can fall into. If your discriminant equals 0, then you have 1 real repeated solution. Now, why is it repeated? Square root of 0 is 0. So 0 can't be positive, 0 can't be negative, it's 0. Last category, if you evaluate that formula and it's less than 0, then you have 2 complex solutions. So the thing to keep in mind there, you're going to have a negative square root, which means the imaginary numbers come into play. So again, this is just a description of what the categories are. That way when we start solving them out, we know exactly what we should expect. So instead of talking through it, let's actually start solving them out. Alright, so let's look at example number 1. So example number 1 already solved out. So I'll basically walk through everything that happened. Calculate the discriminant and determine the nature of the solutions. So you have 9x squared plus 24x plus 16 equals 0. So this thing here is absolutely important. For quadratic formula, equation must be equal to 0. Must be equal to 0. Must be equal to 0. It's got to be in standard form. If you're using the quadratic formula, using the discriminant, the equation's got to be equal to 0. So if it's not equal to 0, you got some rewriting you got to do. Here it's equal to 0, so we're good to go. Once it's equal to 0, identify your A, your B, and your C. Once you identify them, all them into the formula. So that gives you 24 squared minus 4 times 9 times 16. If you be evaluating, you end up with 0. So your discriminant was 0. That would fall into that category right there. So you have one real repeated solution. So that equation, if you were to solve it out, would give you one solution that will repeat itself. So, any questions? Example number 1. All right, not seeing or hearing any, let's go to example number 2. All right, so for both examples 2 and 3, we have the same predicament. The equation is not equal to 0, and they're not in standard form. So that means we have to get the equation into standard form. So for example number 2, the 4's got to come over, and the negative x squared has got to come over. So in standard form, this becomes x squared plus 6x minus 4 equals 0. So again, you have to get it into standard form equal to 0 before you kick anything off. Do not use quadratic formula to discriminate until it's in standard form. Now that it's in standard form, we can go ahead and start solving out. So A equals 1, B equals 6, C equals negative 4. So now we can evaluate the expression. 6 squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 4. So 6 squared is 36. Negative 4 times 1 times negative 4, 16. 2. So there's your discriminant. So your discriminant is positive. So that means we're in our first category of solutions. Discriminant's positive. We're going to have two real solutions. The question will be, is it rational or irrational? That depends on whether 52 is a perfect square or not, which it isn't. 52 is not a perfect square, so that means you're going to have two real irrational solutions. That's it. Problem's over. Again, right now they didn't ask you what they are. They're asking you what's the discriminant and what kind of answer should you be giving. They didn't ask what the answers are yet. Any questions? Example 2. Alright, let's go ahead and finish off this particular problem. So, feel free to type in the chat or come off mute and feel free to say so. What kind of discriminant are we working with here? What value did we get? Open up my chat as well. So, what are we working with regards to the discriminant? Oh, no one made the problem. Okay. But okay, so we got a problem that didn't get done. That's okay. So I know that first meeting in standard form. So that's in standard form. I know we got to do something to this problem. What do we do to this problem? Oh, some of you also got tryptophan from Thanksgiving dinner. 5x squared minus 3x plus 1 equals 0. We got to solve out b squared minus 4ac. What do we get when we do that? That's something to... Yeah. But Eric, the question is, when you find the discriminant, what do you get? What do you get? Negative 11. Alright, so that lets me know that Michaela and Eric must be the only 2 people that are paying attention. So that means I can get the extra credit and give everyone else a 0, right? I think that sounds like a great idea. So I'm going to give Eric and Michaela the extra credit and give everyone else a 0. That sounds like a great idea. See? I know some of y'all have done it, but some of you all needs to get it together. So we should get negative 11 if we solve this out. And since that's negative, you're going to have 2 complex solutions. We have 2 complex solutions. So, of course, you got to plug the numbers in and then work that part out. Now, my hope for some of you all out there is that you're putting in and actually showing the work. Because if you just put what I have on the screen, you're going to get it marked wrong. You're going to get it marked wrong if you don't show your work. You cannot use the "I did it in my calculator" excuse. At minimum, you better at least show me that you did this. At least show me that you did that. Now, if you go to the calculator after that, I can live with that. But at least this tells me what you did. Remember, I have to see your work. I'm not going to take your word for it. I want to see your work. Questions before we start using the quadratic formula? All right, let's keep it moving. All right, so when we use the quadratic formula, we're using the entire formula from start to finish. Now we don't focus on one part, we use all of it. So example 1 is a problem that is already set up, solved out, and it also represents the bare minimum that you need to show when you're doing your work. So I've at least set up for you what I'm expecting to see when I grade your work. So that means anything less than that is grounds for you not getting full credit. So we walk through example 1. Negative 6x plus 3x squared equals negative 1. First things first, get the problem into standard form. So that means everything on one side, the equation equal to 0. So this takes care of standard form. 3x squared minus 6x plus 1 equals 0. Now we do the quadratic formula. So there's the formula. I wrote it to myself. That way it's there. Plug in everything. Start simplifying. So negative b means the opposite of b. There's your 6. Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac. You work that out, you end up with 24. 2 times a, 2 times 3, 6. That's what gets us there. We simplify some more. The square root of 24 is not perfect, so we break it down. 24, the square root of 24 is 4 times 6. So that's 2 square root 6. So that would give you 6 plus or minus 2 square root 6 over 6. So the last part is you reduce. You reduce if you can reduce. So the only parts that you can touch for the purposes of reducing are the numbers that are not underneath the square root. The only thing that you can touch are the numbers that are not underneath the square root. So you have a 6, a 2, and a 6. All of them are divisible by 2. So if you divide them all by 2, you get 3 plus or minus square root 6 over 3. That is called your exact solution. The decimal answers are your approximate solutions. So, sometimes the problem will ask you for the exact, sometimes the problem will ask you for the approximate, and sometimes it will ask you for both. So if it asks you for both, you give both. If it asks you for both, you give both. If it asks you for exact, you give exact. If it asks you for approximate, you give approximate. So reading the directions carefully, fundamentally important. Any questions on example 1? You talk about the 1.82 and the 0.18? Put them in the calculator. 3 plus the square root of 6, and then divide the answer by 3. 3 minus the square root of 6, and then divide the answer by 3. So These two answers come from putting that in calculator. Just know you can't do it all at once, you gotta do it one at a time. Any other questions before we do example 2? Alright, that's seeing your hearing, let's do example 2. So example 2, same type of particle. This equation, not in standard form. So we need that equation in standard form. What is it? We can't start this problem until it's in standard form.
12x squared minus 4x minus 5.
Beautiful. 12x squared minus 4x minus 5 equals 0. You gotta get the equation in standard form. And I need to see that you put it in standard form. Once it's in standard form, now we can go ahead and use our formula. So we plug in our values. So b is negative 4 plus or minus square root of negative 4 squared minus 4 times 12 times negative 5 all over 2 times 12. Again, showing your work is mandatory. Do not show your work. I'll give you the 2 points for the answers, but take off the other 6 for not showing your work. So please don't put me in that situation. That sucks. So now let's start solving this out. So the opposite of b, the opposite of negative 4, so that's 4, plus or minus square root. So the part that's underneath the square root, you can go right ahead and throw that into a calculator. $256. And 2 times 12, 24. So now we're just systematically evaluating the problem. $256, if my memory serves, is a perfect square. That's 16. 4 plus or minus 16 over 24. So that means we can get our 2 answers. So one of your answers is going to be 4 plus 16 divided by 24. 20 over 24, which is 5 over 6. 4 minus 16. Negative 12 over 24, negative 1/2. Here's your 2 answers. That one's a little bit more nice and neat. Questions, example 2. negative 4 squared should give you 16. Negative 4 times 12 times negative 5 gives you 240. So this part would be 16 plus 240, which gives you 256. So that part, I just threw it all into the calculator. Do make sure that you put parentheses around the negative 4 before you square it. And probably put the parentheses around the 12 and around the negative 5. Any other questions? Example number 2 before we go to 3. Three is probably the last one that we'll touch today. So we'll do example 4 tomorrow. All right, example 3. So example 3, same rules apply. You need it into standard form. X squared minus 4x plus 13 equals 0. So you can at least get it in standard form, but can't do anything else. You'll at least get the sympathy point. 1 point out of 8 is better than 0 points out of 8. Once it's in standard form, go to our formula. So negative 4 plus or minus square root. Negative 4 squared minus 4 times 1 times 13. Do each of our individual parts. The opposite of negative 4, 4. If you work out what's underneath the square root, negative 4 squared is 16. Minus 4 times 1 times 13 should give you negative 36. 2 times 1 is 2. Questions so far? All right, so let's finish this problem off. So the square root of negative 36. So we have a negative square root. You can take negative square roots. Again, if you write this as not a real answer, you're getting the problem marked wrong. You can take the square root of a negative number. If you're still struggling with that, feel free to come holler at me after school. We can review imaginary numbers. But we're solving that out. Negative square root of 36 is 6i. So then we can reduce this out. The 4, the 6, and the 2 are all divisible by 2. So you get 2 plus or minus 3i over 1. So 2 plus or minus 3i. That problem's over. There's nothing else you can do to that problem. It's just imaginary numbers. Any questions with example number 3? Alright, well that takes care of that. This is